Dra'Gora, Draenor's Honor. Chapter 3. The Long Walk. The sun dipped below the canopy of Tanaan Jungle, casting a crimson hue over the dense forestry. The Dra'Gora stood in silence, their faces hardened by grief and exhaustion. Drom Gronhart led them forward, his mind a storm of emotions, sorrow for Ogra, rage at the Lightbound, and a gnawing sense of hopelessness. His warband had been whittled down, and Tanaan Jungle was no longer a place they could call home. Cargill Earthbreaker limped beside him, leaning heavily on his staff. The elder's face was drawn with pain, but his resolve remained unbroken. "We cannot linger here, Drom," he said, his voice low but firm. "The Lightbound will sweep through Tanaan like a wildfire. We must move, and quickly." Drom's eyes were distant, still fixed on the path where Ogra had fallen. He clenched his jaw, swallowing back the tide of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "Zethgol is our only chance," he finally said. "If any of our kin still live, they'll be there." The Dra'Gora nodded as one. They were weary, but their spirits were steeled by a shared, unspoken promise to honor Ogra's sacrifice. Together, they pushed deeper into the jungle, moving with the swift, silent grace of predators who knew their territory. The jungle gave way to the ancient ruins of Zethgol. Bone spikes like the ribcage of a mountainous creature gave way to small huts inside. Stone totems, carved with grim visages of ancestors, loomed above them, dangling on pikes, their eyes hollow and watchful. Fires flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows that danced across the crumbling walls. As they approached, Drom felt a pang in his chest. The stronghold was packed with Maghar civilians, elderly orcs, women, and children. Many were gaunt with hunger, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. The once proud warriors of the Maghar now huddled together, clinging to their meager belongings. It was a sight that twisted the knife of despair even deeper into Drom's heart. A young Maghar woman with a baby strapped to her back approached them, her eyes wide with fear. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The Lightbound are coming?" Drom nodded, his expression grim. "They will be here by dawn. We cannot stay." A murmur of panic swept through the crowd, but Cargill stepped forward, raising his hands to calm them. "Listen to me," the old shaman's voice echoed through the ruins. "We must leave Zethgol and make for Gorgrond. It is our only chance. Tanaan is no longer safe." "But Gorgrond," an elder orc shouted from the crowd. "The land there is harsh and unforgiving. We have no food, no shelter." Drom stepped forward, his face a mask of determination. "We will make do," he said, his voice cutting through the fear. "We are Maghar. We have survived worse. We cannot let the light take us. We cannot let them turn us into mindless slaves." The orcs began to murmur amongst themselves, voices rising with a mix of fear and reluctant agreement. Finally, a grizzled, one-eyed warrior stepped forward. His face was scarred from countless battles, but his eyes still burned with a fierce, unyielding spirit. "I am Ragnar Bloodfist," he growled. "I fight beside Gromash when we tore down the gates of Shatrath. If you say march, then we march." Drom clasped forearms with Ragnar, who seemed to be leading the Maghar taking refuge in Zethgol, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "We march," he echoed. "Gather what you can carry. We leave now." The exodus from Zethgol was a somber procession. The warriors of the Dra'Gora flanked the column, watching the shadows for any sign of the Lightbound. The civilians moved in silence, and the children, too frightened to cry. The air was thick with the scent of fear and the acrid smell of burning wood as they left the last of their fires behind. As they trekked through the dense underbrush, Drom fell into step beside a young girl who clutched a carved wooden doll. Her face was smudged with dirt, and her eyes were wide with a sorrow far beyond her years. "What's your name, little one?" Drom asked, his voice softer than usual. "Nala," she whispered, staring up at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "Where are we going?" "To Gorgrond," Drom said. "It's a land of giants and stone, but it's safe from the Lightbound," he hoped. Nala frowned. "Will the Lightbound find us there?" Drom knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Not if I can help it," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, steely promise. As they moved onward, the jungle around them seemed to grow darker, the air thick with the distant hum of Lightbound forces. They were closing in, fast. Cargill fell back to walk beside Drom, his face lined with worry. "They're gaining on us," a shaman murmured. "We need to move faster." Drom's jaw clenched. "We can't push them any harder. We'll lose them." Cargill's eyes flicked to the horizon. "Then we must buy them time." Drom called a halt, his voice ringing out in the twilight. "Ragnar, take the children and the civilians and move ahead to Gorgrond," he ordered. "We'll hold the line here and slow the Lightbound." Ragnar hesitated, his one good eye searching Drom's face for any hint of doubt. Finding none, he nodded sharply. "I'll get them there. Ancestors watch over you, Gronhart." As Ragnar and the crowd disappeared into the jungle, Drom turned to the Dra'Gora. They were fewer now, their numbers diminished by battle and loss, but their faces were set in grim, determined lines. They knew what they had to do. Cargill raised his staff, chanting in the tongue of the ancestors. The ground beneath their feet rumbled, stones rumbling and writhing like living fingers of the earth. Drom hefted his axe, his eyes narrowing as the first glimmers of light broke through the trees. The Lightbound were here. Arun the Redeemed led them, seemingly untouched by the horrors of the jungle, alive and well, his body still bearing the marks of their former altercation. Drom's breath caught in his throat. Arun the Redeemed stood there, his eyes alight with holy zeal. It was impossible. Drom had seen Arun fall in their last battle. "This can't be," muttered Cargill, his voice a trembling whisper. "I was there when he died, Drom. I felt his spirit leave this world." The other Dra'Gora warriors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces twisted with shock and horror. Granash the beast, normally unshakable, took a step back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is a trick," he snarled. "It must be." Arun met their eyes, and for a moment a flicker of recognition passed across his face, an unsettling and unnatural calm. "You look upon the gift of the light," he said, spreading his arms as if to embrace them. "Death is but a doorway. I have been reborn to bring its mercy to you." Drom's heart clenched with fury and sorrow. He spat on the ground, the gesture one of utter contempt. "You're no more alive than a stone in the dirt. The light has enslaved you, Draenor. It has stripped you of your honor, your soul." The Dra'Gora shouted their agreement, their voice a chorus of defiant rage. The shock had turned to anger now. Arun only smiled, serene and unperturbed. "The light forgives your ignorance," he replied, his voice sickeningly gentle. "It will cleanse you all, and you will know peace." Drom's grip tightened on his axe until his knuckles were white. "Then come and try," he spat, Let's see if the light can save you again." Drom stepped forward, his face twisted in a snarl. Arun's eyes softened with false pity. "You bring this upon yourselves, Drom Gronhart. Surrender, and you will know peace." Drom laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Peace?" he echoed. "There's no peace in slavery." With a roar, he charged. The Dra'Gora followed, their voices rising in the battle cry that shook the very trees. The ground erupted with the power of Kargul's spellwork. Earth erupted with magma flowing beside it, and lightning struck the treetops, and rain began to fall. Drom's axe sang through the air, cleaving through Draenei and corrupted orc alike. He fought like a beast, driven by the memory of Ogra, by the sight of Nala's terrified face, by the honor of Draenor itself. For every inch of ground they gave, they took a pound of flesh in return. But the Lightbound were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. The ground had been muddied, soft, wet, slippery mud, making it hard for the Lightbound to advance in comparison to the orcs who were more accustomed to said terrain. Arun raised his staff, a blinding flash of holy light sweeping through the jungle, searing the earth and scattering the Dra'Gora like leaves in a storm. Drom fell back, panting, his body screaming in pain. He looked to Kargul, the shaman's face pale, blood trickling from his mouth. They had held the line, but the Lightbound were still coming. "We've done all we can," Kargul rasped. "It's time to go." Drom nodded, his heart heavy with defeat. He raised his axe one last time, pointing it towards Gorgrond. "Fall back," he bellowed, "to Gorgrond." As they turned and fled into the darkness of the jungle, Drom cast one look back at the ruins of Zethgal, behind the forces of the Lightbound, now overrun by them. Pillars of smoke had begun to rise in the air, a signal of Zethgal's defeat. He knew they had lost this battle, but the war was still far from over. The ancestors were watching. He could not fail them.